Boxing Source here live and just giving a quick video about the result of the middleweight championship fight that was at the Madison Square Garden between WBC, IBO middleweight champion and WBA middleweight super champion Gennady Golovkin going up against the WBA regular champion in the middleweight division, Daniel Jacobs. A lot of people came into the fight with an expectation that Gennady Golovkin would probably blow away Daniel Jacobs. The odds were definitely against Daniel Jacobs there. It closed at around 3-1 odds. It kind of opened up a little bit higher than that, but once it came closer to the fight, the odds kind of went down a little bit, but still you had 3-1 odds that they were saying that Jacobs would win this fight. But I mean, I watched the fight a couple of times, and I'm still overall disappointed with the result that came out, with a unanimous decision going to Gennady Golovkin. You had scores of, say, 115, 112, 115, 112, and 114, 113. Yes, Gennady Golovkin did score a knockdown in the fourth round, but it was, mainly Jacobs getting caught, and then, Gennady Golovkin continuing to come forward. So, with that momentum, Daniel Jacobs went down to the canvas. He got up, fairly quickly. There wasn't really anything else that kind of like put him in that much damage for the rest of that round, and I would say mostly for the rest of that fight. There were a few things that, I kind of go over when it comes to judging particular fights. One thing is ring generalship. The other is effective aggression. And the other one is how you control your defense and how you take the opponent's punches. Now, there were times when Gennady Golovkin was able to affect Daniel Jacobs with a jab, but it was only, to me, it was like few and far between. This is in comparison to what Jacobs was doing throughout the fight, especially within the first couple of rounds, first 3 or 4 rounds. It was more of him throwing out the jab, moving around a little bit, mixing things up in close quarters, and showing defense. And there was a good amount of times where he was able to do that. Gennady Golovkin did have a strategy to cut off the ring for Daniel Jacobs, and there was like multiple times where it didn't work. One of the things that was kind of like stressed in the corner was, for Jacobs to, throw out the jab and then move around. What he did was, I saw that was very effective, is that once he threw the jab or threw a couple of punches, threw the combinations, he moved to, Golovkin's left. And when he moved to Golovkin's left, it kind of, made Golovkin have to, rotate over or turn to his left and then reset. So I thought that was very effective. I thought that kind of like limited the amount of activity that Gennady Golovkin could do. And most of the output that Gennady Golovkin had was when it was in close quarters. He didn't, execute the jab. He didn't throw out the jab that much. He didn't throw double jabs like Daniel Jacobs did. Daniel Jacobs executed the double jab multiple times in the fight. One of the other things that he did was he threw the jab to the body, which was something that I really didn't much see from other Golovkin opponents. And so with that, I just seen that the effort of Daniel Jacobs was, so much that Gennady Golovkin didn't really have much of an answer to what Jacobs was doing. There was like a couple of times where Daniel Jacobs did have his left hand down, and to me that was kind of a mistake because he was inviting Gennady Golovkin to score with that right hand or the right hook. He did get caught a couple of times with that right hook, and there was also a time where he did get affected a little bit by an uppercut that, backed him up for a little bit. But even then, he was still able to, take it in stride and adjust. But a lot of times in close quarters when, they slugged it out, Golovkin threw his sit-up punches and Jacobs came back, with his set-up punches and, kind of responded by, like hitting his gloves multiple times, standing at Golovkin to, say, come on, like he could take his punches. And, by the end of the fight, I felt that Daniel Jacobs had a 2-round lead or so, or a 2-point lead. I couldn't necessarily say that Golovkin won more than 5 rounds total. And it wasn't like, 5 clear wins of a round by Gennady Golovkin in that fight. To me, once those judges made that decision, I kind of felt like it was a politics move. We all know that Gennady Golovkin is the quote-unquote man on HBO, with the exception of Canelo Alvarez. And we know that they're trying to get that Canelo Alvarez Gennady Golovkin fight on HBO pay-per-view, whether it's September this year or whether it'll be next year. And the biggest buzz for that fight would only happen if both of those guys were able to, stay with the records they had and not lost once they got to that particular point. Of course, we know that Alvarez has a 1 loss for Mayweather, and Golovkin is sitting there, being undefeated. Now, HBO had seen one of their featured fighters that has been shown within HBO over the past year and a half, and Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez lose by majority decision to Wisaksil Wangek, otherwise known as Srisaket Sor Rungvisai, by majority decision to lose the WBC Super Flyweight Championship. This guy, Rungvisai, had his last loss to Carlos Cuadras back in 2014, but people thought that with Chocolatito Gonzalez being the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter by a lot of boxing analysts, boxing publications, and boxing fans like that, Roman Gonzalez would be able to get that win in order to see if there was a potential rematch with Carlos Cuadras later on in the year, but that didn't happen. So HBO at Madison Square Garden already seen a monumental upset of sorts with that particular fight, and he just couldn't see having 2 upsets in one night, even though Daniel Jacobs, I felt, fought his ass off against Gennady Golovkin, and there was, multiple times where Golovkin seemed to be, less active or effective in comparison to the other fighters that he's faced. It looked like, the whole thing about Golovkin's power and knockout ability and things like that kind of weren't the case here against Daniel Jacobs. And while, there was that whole little thing about Jacobs not making that IBF same day weigh-in to see if he was over 170 pounds or whatnot, still didn't necessarily matter. I think that, we came there in order to fight at a comfortable weight, fight at the weight that he felt would be more effective against Golovkin, and was able to do what he needed to do in order to execute his game plan, which he was able to do. I think the game plan by Daniel Jacobs and his camp and his trainers were done during that fight. I don't think that what Golovkin was doing and what, Abel Sanchez was, telling him to do or to prepare to do had that much effect. He did attempt to cut off the ring multiple times, but, there were times when Daniel Jacobs was back to the ropes. Either he, blocked a series of Golovkin's punches, or he rolled with the punches that Golovkin was throwing at him, and then was able to move away from the ring and get the fight to the middle of the ring. So, with Jacobs being able to know when he's on the ropes, get out of the ropes when he needed to, or, make adjustments to what Golovkin's attack patterns were, showed that he was in control of the fight. Just because a fighter seems, quote unquote, more active or has the higher amount of punches thrown that round doesn't mean that those punches had as much of effect as the ones that were thrown by the opponent. And to me, I just didn't see where Golovkin's punches showed that he was more of an effective puncher during that fight than Daniel Jacobs was. So with that, I just felt that Jacobs was the clear winner of that fight, and he should have earned those middleweight titles that Gennady Golovkin had. But sometimes boxing shows that it's more of a business than it is a sport, and this was a clear example of that. We'll go into more depth in this on the Boxing Source radio show, which will be, this time it'll be on the 20th of March on the Go Long Media channel on Blog Talk Radio.